Alright, so today we're taking a look at the Montreal Canadiens as we continue the Summer Report series. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe. Check out the rest of our playlist on the Summer Report series as we take a look at all 31, soon to be 32 NHL teams. Let's get right into this. So, the Montreal Canadiens last season missed the playoffs. They've missed the playoffs the last 2 or 3 years now. What is going on in Montreal? Well, we know that there was a little bit of, not really a rebuild, but a retool of the organization over the past couple of years. Marc Bergevin made a couple of, let's say, interesting moves over the past couple of years. But last season, he seemed to turn it around. So those calls for Bergevin's head kind of gone away for now. So, taking a look at the Montreal Canadiens, they have a little over $4 million left to mess around with. More than likely, they will keep that money for next season because they have some contracts they're going to be giving out from now until July 1st that they need to shore up this team. And those players being Max Domi, who's in the final year of his contract, the newly acquired Max Domi from last season. So, they're going to have to get him re-signed. Centerman Charles Hudon, he's probably going to get a contract. Probably not a super big contract, but he's definitely going to. He's more than likely going to be asking for at least $1.5 million, if not $2 million. He's been a pretty reliable player there for the Montreal Canadiens. And then you have Victor Mete, who is still he's still a young player. He'll be a restricted free agent, but still, you have to re-sign him. So. He's got to score his first NHL. He's got to score an NHL goal though, so hopefully he could do that this year. So taking a look at the lineup, so that's really it. I'm just going to go off the big names that are available next season that they have to sign contracts for. Looking at how much salary cap they have, so that's kind of where we're at. So taking a look at the first line for the Montreal Canadiens. Heading into the season, you have Thomas Tatar and Brendan Gallagher on the wings. Pretty good first line overall. I think Tatar was a good addition last year. Everybody said, Vegas fleeced the Montreal Canadiens here in this trade. Tatar actually turned out to be a pretty good piece. And Brendan Gallagher, he's been there for a while. He's a good gritty player. He can score goals. But, those are pretty good wingers. Those are pretty good wingers on that first line. And then you have Philip Deneau down the middle. So he's going to be pretty much the guy for now. They probably want to shield some of the younger talent down the middle. So, and we'll get into that. But overall, that's a pretty good first line for the Montreal Canadiens. Taking a look at the second line, you have Jonathan Drouin, he may end up being trade bait. He was supposed to be one of the big centers for the Canadiens. They have him on the wing. I don't really think he's going to become a center at any point. At this point in time, he's shown us he can't play down the middle, so he's probably going to end up being a winger. And then you have Nick Suzuki making the lineup. So that would be interesting. They have a lot of holes on this team. So it leaves you asking the question, what is Montreal going to do with this roster? They have a lot of really young talent, and they have a couple holes in the lineup, but, do you want to, it comes down to where do you want to play your youth? So let's take a look at the third line. Also, you have Max Domi down the middle on the second line. Again, that's an interchangeable position. Nick Suzuki played center. Max Domi has played center. And some of these other guys that I talk about on the third line can also jump up into that second line for the center role. You have Joel Armia on the wing, Arturi Lehkonen. I think these are two pretty decent players. Armia's a little bit of a weakness, but he's still an NHL caliber player. And for a Montreal team that hasn't made the playoffs, that's actually a pretty decent third line, especially when you factor in Jesperi Kotkaniemi down the middle. It's a pretty good line. And again, he's one of those pieces I think can be interchangeable, jumping up into that second line, whether Domi, struggles a little bit, at the center spot, or Nick Suzuki doesn't come in, or he plays on the third line. There's definitely some room for flexibility here for the Canadiens. And then the fourth line, you have Paul Byron and Jordan Wheel. They can both play center, so really good depth for centers in Montreal, as well as Ryan Paling down the middle in the fourth line. So this is where things get a little bit interesting. So obviously Ryan Paling ended the season with the Canadiens on a super high note in that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, scoring a hat trick, getting the game-winning goal in the shootout. It was a pretty unbelievable game, to say the least. For that's a rookie's dream, is to come in your first game, get a hat trick, shootout, game-winning goal, especially against a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are pretty big rivals with the Canadiens. So, this is the thing. Would you rather Paling play on the fourth line in the NHL, or would you rather him play in the top six in the American Hockey League, where he can continue to grow and develop? That's the situation you have with the Canadiens, and that's why you look at other players, as like Cole Caulfield, who they brought in. So these are just things that the Canadiens have to start to figure out. What is the best for their players moving forward, and that's where Marc Bergevin's going to be tested. Can he grow these players? And he's kind of tested that already with Paling and Kokoniemi, them working out. But that doesn't mean everybody, is ready for the NHL right away. And then, especially in a place like Montreal, you don't play well. Well, you kind of get a bad reputation. Your reputation's a little bit tainted, and it's hard to play well in Montreal under those circumstances, especially as a young player. So take a look at the defense, and this is a little bit of a mess. These pieces are pretty much interchangeable from the first pairing to the third pairing. But let's take a look. You have Victor Mete and Shea Weber. Now, Victor Mete they have him on Daily Faceoff. Go check them out. They're a great site for checking out lines. That's my source for this. Victor Mete, he's a young player. He's going to score his first NHL goal. But, yeah, he's a good player. He's going to be very important for the, turning the leaf for the Montreal Canadiens. And he's going to be a huge part of this sort of retool for them. Shea Weber, he needs to stay healthy for the Canadiens. He is the best defenseman on the Montreal Canadiens roster. He needs to stay healthy. He struggled to stay healthy last year, and I think that's a big hindrance on why the Canadiens missed. They missed the playoffs by 1 point. Shea Weber's in the lineup for at least another 10 games. I'd say Montreal would have been back in the Stanley Cup playoffs last season. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. But taking a look at the second pairing, you have Brett Kulak and Jeff Petrie. I like Jeff Petrie. That's a pretty good piece there. Brett Kulak has shown he can be a pretty good defenseman in the NHL. So that's a pretty decent top four. But then things start to, let's say, they show their weaknesses on the third pair. Because you have Ben Sherratt and Noah Juulsen. So Juulsen, he played in the NHL a little bit last year. He spent some time in Laval with the Laval Rocket of the American Hockey League. And this is his NHL shot, so hopefully he's able to make it count. He's a pretty good player. He could end up being in the top four by the end of the season. Whether there's injuries or maybe they move Kulak or Petrie just to, change things, just to change up the combinations. But overall, pretty good. Ben Sherratt, who was brought in from Winnipeg, we'll just have to wait and see. He's a pretty decent defenseman, so it's just he's a little bit slow. He's not the most fleet of foot in terms of his skating, but he's still a pretty good defenseman. He kind of fills that void that they lost with Jordy Ben, who went to the Vancouver Canucks. And then taking a look at the goaltending, so you have Carey Price and Keith Kincaid. So Keith Kincaid was brought in kind of as just it's an upgrade over what they've had with Antti Niemi. They still have Charlie Lindgren, who will be playing as well here and there. So they have three pretty capable goaltenders. Obviously, Carey Price being the best out of all of them. But, they're going to need that depth because what I get to in a minute here. Carey Price needs to stay healthy as well as Shea Weber. And that's kind of becoming a theme with this hockey team, is those are their two greatest assets. Not that they're old, but they are continuing to get older. They're not in their 20s anymore. Shea Weber is older. He's in his mid-30s. Carey Price is hit 30 a couple years ago. So this team is definitely starting to show its age. With that said, do I have the Montreal Canadiens making the playoffs? The million-dollar question. I'm going to say yes. I think the Montreal Canadiens can make, at the very least, a very good push like they did last season. I think they're going to be in it up until April. The question becomes, if you could tell me that Shea Weber and Carey Price are healthy and ready to go every night for 75, 77 games this season, the Canadiens will be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I can almost guarantee that. If they're not in the lineup and we start seeing in, November, December, Carey Price or Shea Weber, out of the lineup, injuries here and there, not good. Not good. And the problem is it's starting to become a real issue for the Canadiens. And we're seeing that Shea Weber contract trade with PK Subban, for better or for worse. It's one of those things where this is what happens when you pick up an older guy who's definitely, he's not a dinosaur, but he's definitely he's not fitting the style of today's NHL. But if he can stay healthy, he's still finding a way to be a reliable defenseman. And Carey Price, obviously being one of the best goaltenders, if not the best goaltender in the NHL, he needs to stay healthy. He is, again, a huge part of the Canadiens. And not that Keith Kincaid or Charlie Lindgren can't go on a run, but you need, that extra cushion of having Carey Price there really helps out the Canadiens. So let me know what you guys think of the Montreal Canadiens. Will they make the Stanley Cup playoffs or not? Will Carey Price and Shea Weber be able to stay healthy for at least a 75 to 82 game season for both of them? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe. Check out our Instagram as well, @GoalLineHockey. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.